everyone, I'm John with Roadkill Incorporated. Today I wanted to make a quick video to clarify a point that a lot of people just don't seem to comprehend, so I wanted to make it as simple as possible. The issue I'm talking about is new Apple parts, new OEM parts. Right to Repair requires manufacturers to make available new OEM parts at supposedly fair prices, which is good, I'm not knocking that, but I would argue that new Apple parts don't really help recyclers, they don't really help refurbishers, they largely don't help the reuse market. And so new Apple parts are not some kind of magic bullet that fixes repair, as some would suggest. Basically, here's how this breaks down. When a person takes a broken computer to a repair shop, that repair shop charges the owner a fee, which may include parts, let's say $600. If the owner is willing to pay the $600, which may include a $400 new screen from Apple, then that's a good deal for the repair shop. The cost of goods sold is $400 for the screen, then there's time, labor, etc. So let's say $600 minus $450 is $150 profit. A repair shop may determine that this is worthwhile for them to do. The computer may only be worth $200 on eBay, but if the customer is crazy enough to pay the $600, which sometimes they are, then it doesn't really matter what the value of the computer is. And we have a good transaction on our hands here, and availability of that new part is a good thing. But for the most part, users are not paying $600 to fix a $200 computer. They're paying $600 to fix a $1,200 computer. In other words, they are the first user of this machine, which they probably bought new. So in this way, you can see how right to repair and availability of new parts mostly benefits the first user of a device, and it also benefits consumer-facing repair businesses that make money not on the value of the device, but on what customers are willing to pay to have that device repaired. So that's scenario number one, consumer-facing repair shop scenario. Now let's look at scenario number two, which is recyclers, refurbishers, and basically all of reuse. Really, we're talking about every device that exists, because after the first user of a device gets rid of it, it enters the realm of scenario number two. It's all the devices, not some little niche category that I'm whining about. So in this scenario, the recyclers and refurbishers own all of their devices. A repair shop doesn't own the devices, but a recycler, refurbisher owns the devices. So the profit they get is based not on what some owner will pay, but on what the actual value of the device is on the open market. Because to profit, they end up selling their devices. And not only that, but all devices that recyclers and refurbishers get are past the first user. It's onto the second user, the third user. And once a device is onto its second user or third, it's worth only a small fraction of what it was originally worth. Like, for example, a MacBook, by the time it's gotten to its third user, is worth $200, not $1,200. Chances are a recycler or a refurbisher didn't pay much for it, maybe nothing, maybe $50. So let's say cost of goods sold is $50, and if they sell it at $200, the profit is $150. But let's add a broken screen into the scenario. Would you buy a $400 OEM new Apple screen to fix your $200 computer that you own? Your cost of goods sold would be $450, you would sell it for $200, and you would be $250 in the red. That's not a really sustainable way to run a business. So this, put very simply, is what I'm talking about. This is why new OEM parts don't do a thing for recyclers and refurbishers. In 15 years of refurbishing, I've refurbished over 100,000 MacBooks, maybe way more. I've lost count, not sure. And I have not bought a single OEM Apple part. Not one. And I'm being generous with the example numbers here. A new screen from Apple, even the new, fair and reasonable right to repair price, is likely way more than $400, probably more like $800. I was just in a Verge article thanks to the really great reporter Maddie Stone, and she illustrated my point right in the beginning of the article, which is really great. It's probably the highest profile mention of this problem that's out there. She talks about a situation I had in which I ended up with 5 laptops with broken screens, and it was not viable to replace those screens. She says another 5 had broken screens that would lose True Tone unless Bumstead replaced them with expensive new screens from Apple, something that would have eaten up most of the revenue he could earn refurbishing them. Actually, like I mentioned, it eats up all of the revenue most all of the time and puts you into debt. It's not a matter of making $20 versus $100. It's a matter of this does not make sense, period, ever. But this is a really good illustration of the point, so I'm happy this is out there. So anyway, what this all comes down to is that new parts are a good thing, yes, for the first user of a device and for consumer-facing repair businesses, but they don't do much at all for devices that move on from their first user and begin their second life. That is what people need to understand. But wait, it gets worse. Apple is now implementing parts pairing, which basically means there is a cryptographic handshake going on between the board and many or all of the parts of a device. So when you buy that new part from Apple, you can install it, but it won't work initially. You have to actually talk to Apple, and they flip a switch on their end, pair the part to your machine, and then you can use it. And guess what? They won't pair used parts. That's the kicker here. So this means that in the future, used parts won't be usable, and to get any Apple device fixed, you must buy a new part. Apple absolutely owns the whole industry in this scenario. Consumer-facing repair shops are 100% at Apple's mercy at that point because they must buy new parts, and it's Apple that waves the magic wand and allows every single repair. But even in that doom and gloom scenario, consumer-facing repair shops may not mind parts pairing all that much, because if they're buying all Apple parts new from Apple, then they can still run their business. They can still make some semblance of profit. The same cannot be said, however, of reuse, recycling, and refurbishing. Because how do you think recyclers and refurbishers who deal with all the devices that exist, how do you think they do repairs currently? As I've said, they don't buy new parts. What they do is use parts from broken devices. They use used parts. When they get thousands of discarded devices, they use the bad ones to repair the mostly good ones. When I get, say, 100 computers, as a general rule, 70% of them are repairable, 30% are not, so the parts from the 30 repair the 70. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked. That's how it should work. That's why there are 10 million used parts on eBay and elsewhere, because you should be able to use a used part. It's such common sense, I can't even believe I'm saying it. But under parts pairing, that's all history. The only computers and phones and devices that have even a small chance of moving on to the next owner are the ones that have absolutely nothing wrong with them, not even a weak battery. And it only takes a couple generations of ownership for pretty much all devices to have one problem or another, in which case it's toast, because used parts can't be paired and new parts are in no way economically viable for these devices. Pretty much all the devices in the world, all the devices after the first owner, get scrapped. That's what happens. Apple owns everything. Reuse is dead. So that's my point, but why is this relevant now? Why am I kicking and screaming about this right now? It's because right to repair is getting passed, and right to repair bills don't necessarily do anything about parts pairing. They serve the first user and the consumer-facing repair shops, which is great, but some of these bills are leaving out a parts pairing ban, which is not good. In fact, I think any right to repair bill without a parts pairing ban should absolutely be killed. A right to repair bill that does not include a parts pairing ban effectively legalizes parts pairing. It legalizes it by omission, or even explicitly if Apple succeeds in getting its language in there. Have you wondered why Apple seems a little too happy about stating that it will abide by the California Right to Repair Bill and how it will gladly implement the requirements of the California bill countrywide? It's not because we have won a victory here and Apple is just giving in. It's because the California bill gives them parts pairing, and parts pairing is exactly what they want in order to dominate. They even go so far as stating they would like to see the language in California's Right to Repair Bill become a national Right to Repair Bill. Why is that, you ask? Because it would most likely override all state efforts, and legalization of parts pairing would be the law of the land. So I want to be clear, right to repair is a great thing. I've supported it forever. I know the people involved. They're all really good people working hard for repair and for the industry, but we can't wear blinders here. We can't ignore the needs of all devices after their first use. We can't allow a Trojan horse into the bill that effectively negates all the good the bill is trying to do. I've been an activist for 30 years across multiple areas of interest, and time again I've seen legislation introduced by activist groups that along the way morphs into something it wasn't intended to be, something that actually defeats its own purpose. We can't let that happen with right to repair. Thanks so much for listening.